Hello, my name is Jessica Howell. I have worked in the cardiac cath lab for 6 years, where I see people who suffer from heart disease and have made it my goal to reduce the number of patients who die from cardiovascular disease and to improve their quality of life. The goal of my project is to open a cardiac rehab center in Gig Harbor called the Gig Harbor Cardiac Rehab Center, abbreviated as the GHCRC. During this presentation, I will discuss what cardiac rehab is, who benefits from it, as well as why Gig Harbor is in need of a cardiac rehab program. I will highlight benefits of cardiac rehab along with key business components such as financial projections, workflow, and how the GHCRC will stand out. So what is cardiac rehab? Cardiac rehab provides progressive and monitored exercise to qualifying patients where their vital signs are monitored and their exercise plans are progressed as tolerated. In addition to the progressive exercise program, cardiac rehab offers lifestyle coaching to teach patients about proper nutrition and exercise, which provides them the tools for long-term success. The exercise and education are performed in a group environment, which helps to heal the psychological damage associated with cardiac events. Cardiac rehab reassures patients who suffer from cardiac diseases, providing them with the tools and knowledge they need to be confident in differentiating their symptoms. Many patients, they'll feel a little pain in their chest and they don't know, is this a second heart attack coming on, or, is it just a little indigestion? So it's really powerful. And who is cardiac rehab for? These are for people, who have suffered a heart attack, which is a myocardial infarction, people who have had coronary bypass surgery, those who have had heart transplants or percutaneous interventions, and even people with congestive heart failure. Gig Harbor has a natural need for cardiac rehab as the geriatric population is at an increased risk for heart disease, and according to the 2015 U.S. Census, Gig Harbor's population of residents over the age of 65 is 12.7% higher than the national average. Currently, the residents of Gig Harbor are referred to the surrounding towns for cardiac rehab, which are roughly 30 minutes away. The distance, along with a costly toll bridge at $7 round trip, is a huge inconvenience and deterrent for patients to attend rehab. According to the American Heart Association, less than 20% of eligible patients enroll in cardiac rehab, and a large reason for this is because there are not enough cardiac rehab facilities in the U.S. to accommodate all of the qualifying patients. Benefits of cardiac rehab include a 20 to 30% reduction of mortality rates, as well as psychological healing for the damage that occurs after a cardiac event, the reassurance that patients get from being monitored as they exercise really helps to heal that damage. Improves patients' quality of life. Many patients begin cardiac rehab and are unable to walk from the parking lot to the front door and required to be dropped off. And by the end of cardiac rehab, they're able to walk to their parking spot and do their grocery shopping. In addition to these benefits, cardiac rehab also reduces readmission rates to the hospital, which saves the hospital, insurance companies, and patients money. The one retrospective study showed that patients who attended cardiac rehab were admitted to the hospital 1.4 days less than the patients who did not attend cardiac rehab for the 2 years following their cardiac event. And this, with 2015, the saving or the cost of an inpatient day was over $2,000. So this really adds up and can save the nation millions of dollars. The patient is able to keep employment by remaining out of the hospital, which gives them the ability to provide for themselves and not require state or federal funding to support them. An accurate budget is the foundation for proceeding with the development of the GHCRC. When looking at the finances, really consider the capacity in which the center is going to be operating, as well as the need for the certification through the American Association of Cardiovascular and Pulmonary Rehabilitation, which is the golden standard for Medicare reimbursement. If a facility is not certified, then you do not receive full Medicare reimbursement, and facility is not eligible for certification for the first year. So after the first 2 years, I have projected that we will be operating at full capacity, and we will have our certification through the AACVPR, in which case I project that we will have a gross profit margin of $1.25 million. Up until the 2 years, I have created a really conservative projection, which I projected based off of 50% capacity, still leaving us with a $340,000 profit, which is, enough to provide stability to the business and justifies moving forward with this project. The GHCRC is composed of 3 phases. The first phase is an inpatient phase, which begins while the patients are admitted in the hospital with their qualifying condition. During phase 1, an exercise physiologist will meet with each patient and their family in their rooms to discuss what cardiac rehab is and the process. At the end of this meeting, a referral is sent to the patient's insurance, as well as to the location where they're going to complete their outpatient rehab. The importance of this referral is that Medicare places really strict restrictions on cardiac rehab reimbursement and requires that patients begin rehab within 6 months of their discharge date, with the exception of post-MI patients who have 1 year. So early communication is really key for cardiac rehab. The second phase of cardiac rehab typically begins within 2 to 4 weeks of discharge. This is an outpatient phase. During this phase, patients are set up with an exercise plan, which is progressive and takes into account each patient's specific needs, such as if the patient has an amputation and is limited with mobility. And during their exercise, they're connected to EKG. Each time their blood pressure is taken, their weight is taken, pulse ox is taken. So they really monitor them, and they look at their medications to make sure that their whole well-being is being met. And then upon graduation, patients have the option to join phase 3 of cardiac rehab, which is the maintenance phase. Phase 3 is held at the local YMCA, where patients pay $60 a month, as this service is not covered by insurance. But included in the fee, they have open access with no restrictions on how long they can or cannot work out. And when they check in, they will check in with the exercise physiologist on staff, but then they take their own vital signs and their blood pressure, and they keep it in their own self-kept log. During my research, I met with 2 graduates of the Tacoma's cardiac rehab program, Monty and David. Meeting with them gave me a firm understanding of what needs to be different at the GHCRC. The first barrier they faced was the inconvenience of the commute. Monty resides in Gig Harbor and David lives in Port Orchard. When I asked if they thought that Gig Harbor had a need for a cardiac rehab facility, Monty explained, yes, I live there. And David went on explaining that he had to drive across the Tacoma Narrows Bridge paying $21 a week on top of the cost of rehab. In addition to the commute, David expressed the concern of the hours of operation. He points out that people having heart attacks are working people, and this center should be able to work around them. Patients who suffer from a qualifying condition don't need the extra stress of missing work, and because of this, the GHCRC will have extended hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which will better accommodate the patients. Lastly, I will implement a follow-up phone call to be made 6 months and 1 year post-cardiac rehab graduation. Part of the center's values is to care for the long-term success of each patient. The goal of calling to follow up with our patients, is to find the ones that have become sedentary and slipped into their unhealthy lifestyles, and connect them with the resources that they need. Cardiac rehab has a huge market potential as less than 20% of eligible patients enroll in cardiac rehab. The GHCRC will be a pioneer in cardiac rehab trends that, once followed, will close the gap and lead to large savings nationally. To ensure long-term success, the center will gain certification by the AACVPR, which will maximize Medicare reimbursement and will maintain 3 phases in its cardiac rehab program in order to treat patients most comprehensively. To stand out among similar programs, the GHCRC will operate with extended hours. Cardiac rehab reduces mortality rates, heals psychological damage, improves quality of life, and saves the hospital, patient, and insurance companies money. These benefits will be reflected positively onto the community, as members will be more active and independent with less hospital readmissions. I have been validated on the need that exists in Gig Harbor, Washington for such a center by community members and the lack of space at local facilities. The future of my project lies with sharing my capstone with the cardiovascular service line of CHI Franciscan Health, who owns the hospital in Gig Harbor, with hopes of planting a seed for development and implementation of a real clinic. To find out more information about the benefits and need of cardiac rehab, visit the AACVPR website at www.aacvpr.org. Thank you for sharing my goal in reducing deaths caused by heart disease and improving the quality of life of those affected.